Esikhathini esiphila kuso, ukubona igama lomuntu wesifazane ezindabeni kuletha uvalo ngenxa yesimo esibhekene naso sokuhlukunyezwa kwabantu besifazane.
Man arrested for killing and burying his wife.
40-year-old man rapes and kills over 13 women.
Man arrested for raping a 13-year-old
man
girl.
jailed for life after raping a 7-year-old.
That's university student, 20,
12-year-old
stabbed to death,
raped after swimming a day. Life in jail for a man
school sports coach, assaults multiple female students.
Unene, raped and murdered while collecting a parcel from the post office in broad daylight.
Gender-based violence.
Gender-based violence.
Gender-based violence.
Gender-based violence.
Gender-based violence.
Often when we hear the words gender-based violence, we think of the big things.
We think of abuse. We think of assault. We think of rape. We think of murder. But there's so much more to it.
Some of the experiences of being a woman in South Africa is that of daily catcalling, ensuring your location is sent to someone before getting into an Uber,
Seeing a man undress you with his eyes,
joining a gym class instead of gymming alone.
and guarding your drink like your life depends on it.
The fact that I can't go for a walk alone without feeling unsafe. The reality of being a woman in South Africa is that you have to think of everything all the time.
Down to what I choose to wear in the morning. While my male friends don't give it a second thought, I do everything I can to go unnoticed by men.
I live every day knowing that my life could be taken
While I run my errands,
just because he couldn't help himself.
Uyinene Mkhwetyana went missing more than a week ago. She was attacked in the Claremont post office. Uyinene's body was found buried in a shallow grave in Khayelitsha, days after she was last seen. Her rape and murder sparked widespread protests against gender-based violence.
So I was sitting in the last lecture of the day on a Monday afternoon, and I remember checking my phone and seeing a News 24 article about the fact that police were confirming what it is that had happened to Uyinene, about the fact that she'd been raped and murdered in a post office in broad daylight opposite a police station, and that later her body had been taken to be burnt. And I remember reading this and looking at my phone and thinking, this can't be real. Like, it can't be true. 15 minutes later, I looked outside the window and I remember seeing a whole lot of commotion and a whole lot of noise, and that was what eventually led to the start of various protests and various night vigils for the next few weeks. So I went to the protest at the Union building, and that's where it was that the president addressed us. What stood out to me was the pain that I saw in the faces of so many women that were there. Those next 2 weeks were probably the most difficult and painful as a UCT student. And during this time, I remember having a lot of conversations with my female friends about how it is that they were processing everything and the experiences that they'd felt. And I just remember looking in their faces and seeing a lack of hope, seeing pain, seeing fatigue. It was clear and it was evident to me that there genuinely was no more hope that these women felt. I was heartbroken and realized that something needed to change. During that time, the way that a lot of my female friends did life changed drastically, because I saw a lot of them starting to walk to the shops in groups due to the fear that they felt at the time. I knew that I needed to do something. I believe protests are important in the way that they raise awareness about issues, and so they do play a powerful role. However, my question is, what happens after the protests? What happens next? Like, what change do protests bring? What change are we going to see? And so I thought to myself, hey, what is it that I can do to change the narrative, to shift things and move things forward so that we can see a better South Africa? My name is Karabo Malahleha. I'm 22 years old and a student at UCT. I was raised in KZN by my gogs and Mkulu, my grandparents, with my 2 younger sisters. This is the story of Asikhulumeni. So Asikhulumeni is an isiZulu word and it means let's talk. You see, because for me, my mentality around gender-based violence changed when I started having conversations. And so this is exactly what we aim to do as an organization. We aim to go into schools, with our focus being high schools, both single-sex and co-ed schools, but we aim to specifically target the male students. Up front, we do a presentation with the whole grade. I start this off by sharing my story of how I was sexually abused multiple times by my older male cousin. I choose to have this conversation with them only to be vulnerable, simply to expose myself and show how it is that I have gone through something like this before, in order to break down the stigma and the narrative of boys not being able to show emotion with each other. I choose to be vulnerable so that it will encourage them to be vulnerable with each other as well. We then paint the picture of what GBV looks like in our country. We do so by using a powerful analogy of a tree and the fruit. You see, the fruit of this tree are the hectic things that we hear about, such as rape, such as sexual assault, such as murder. And the roots of this tree are microaggressions that we see in our daily lives, such as locker room chats and catcalling. And we discuss that if we can stop these things at the root and we start to call them out, that we can genuinely begin to see breakthrough and change in our country. We then unpack toxic masculinity and rape culture. We finally conclude that if we as gentlemen can begin to be vulnerable with each other, that if we, instead of bottling up our emotions and displaying them in harmful ways, that if we genuinely start to speak about them to each other, then we will genuinely be able to see change in our country, change that our country so desperately needs. We then take a short break, after which we split the boys up into groups where we have debrief sessions with them, which we believe are where the true change happens. These groups are of no more than 10 boys, where a facilitator from our team will lead a discussion with them. This discussion is a discussion simply on the presentation, and it's where we encourage the boys to share their thoughts, their feelings, and their suggestions on this issue. We then encourage them to be able to brainstorm ways that they can be a part of the solution to ending gender-based violence in our country. Our goal is simple: to do something about what is happening in our country. We simply can't sit back and watch everything unfold. And so that is why, as an organization, we're going to do everything that we can, with as much effort as possible, to change the way that the men of our country treat women. Our why is clear, and we won't stop until the day that my sisters can go for a walk without fearing for their lives. There's a lot we need to do to get to that point. It doesn't matter if we speak to one boy or if we speak to 500 boys. For us, what matters is that we're doing something. We feel like the burden for this issue has been placed on our hearts, and so we're going to do everything that we can to play a part into bringing change, one conversation at a time. This is us simply trying to start the conversation. This is us simply trying to do what we can to change our nation.
Mina nginethemba lokuthi amadoda ezwe lethu kukhona bangakwenza ngale nkinga. It starts with a conversation.
Gentlemen, Asikhulumeni.
Let's talk.
Let's talk.
Let's talk.
Let's talk.
Let's talk.